Shit's about to...
Hey guys, welcome back to the Unwracked Podcast. I'm Andrew Barry, your host, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Kyle Wilkes and Phil Viz. Today we got a good one for you. We're doing something a little different that I don't think any other podcast does. Last week we talked about breaking down submissions in terms of people's contest preps, how they went in terms of PEDs, cardio, diet, training, and any other factors they wanted to share with us. Today we're going to pull 4 listeners out, and we're going to go over each one of the plans, try to break it down in detail, and give suggestions on where they might have been able to do better. Guys, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do the pictures first, or do you want to look at the program and then look at the pictures after? What do you guys think?
Let's start with pictures.
I think pictures are better because then we can have an idea of who we're talking about. We can discuss what improvements we would make to the physique, maybe some posing, and then we kind of know what to look for or where these results went once we start looking at the information.
Okay, I like that. All right, so I don't know this gentleman's last name because... And here's the other thing, guys, when you're submitting to us, and I think in the future we're going to create a form that's going to be really easy for you guys to follow so we get the exact information that we need. But namely, like, we definitely need your name so we can give you credit, right? This one was submitted to us from a Coach Sam. And let me pull this up. There we go. All right, guys, what do you think?
Kyle, you're up, buddy.
So I look at, from front to back, I think his front is better than his backside. Conditioning stands out to me in terms of it could be improved upon. Not a particular fan of the posing, but I'll let that go in terms of him kind of squatting down. A lot of people do that to make the legs appear better, but they actually appear worse most of the
Speak
time.
on that for a minute, because I think we see that so often with like our client pictures, and even some posing coaches I see teach that, because I just had a female that I was working on yesterday, and she's a pro. And she was squatting down, and I'm like, look at that gap you're creating right there. But go ahead and touch on that, Kyle.
So I think a lot of the times, I don't know if it's because people feel that they engage their legs more if they squat, or if they feel like that the X frame is better. But the reality is when you have a gap, even on a side chest, and you can see between the arm and the torso, similarly here, we look in between his legs, it's just too wide. It makes his legs look smaller. This guy's legs aren't bad. They could be better, but they're not. From the backside, for example, because he has that gap, if he were to position his legs a little differently, not squat as much, you get some adductor in there, he'd have a pretty thick posterior chain. Mm-hmm. So I think that's my rationale for why they might do it. I think sometimes getting into your back pose, if you kind of squat down and then stand up into the pose, you can engage everything a little bit better, but I would never remain in that position, especially if you're trying to hold the poses. I don't know about you guys, but if you go to squat down, at some point you're getting pretty fatigued versus just activating your quads from your hip flexor down. Yeah. Standing up, it's going to give you the sweep that you're looking for generally.
Phil, what do you think about both the posing and his condition here?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Kyle said about the posing. Pushing your knees apart is never a good thing. It creates a huge thigh gap. I mess around. I call it the dick up the ass pose because that's what it looks like. It looks like you got a dick up your ass, and that's how you're posing. But and I also say that to kind of deter people from doing it. But when you're looking at how he's posing his legs, what happens when you push your knees apart is you actually flatten your quad sweep out down by the knee. And people don't realize this. When you shorten a muscle like your bicep peaks. Same thing happens to every other muscle group. So when your legs are straighter, your quads are going to have more pop, especially from the outside. And when you bend those knees, now you're lengthening the quad, but you're also kind of blending the quad into the knee, and it kind of takes away from that. And then from the back, he's squatting down so much. Now the problem with that is when you squat down like that and you've already got your knees turned out, your adductors completely disappear. So he's losing leg size on that. So, that can be a problem. Now, here with his side posing, you could see that he's got the arm turned the wrong way on the side try, although he does have the torso positioned very well, and I like the way he's posing the legs. And on the side chest, he's too level, because remember, the judges are down and away, and what you want to do is you want to show more depth across the top of the chest. So I always tell all my clients, make sure the judges can see your collarbone. Because if your chest is all the way up here, they can't see your collarbone. And if you lean down a little bit, it creates more bubbles and depth across the top, and it also shows your traps more. So it makes you look deeper, it gives you more depth. And what you can also notice here is when people lift their chest too much, their stomach sticks out a little bit. And, he's doing that here too. So, that can be fixed.
That's a good point.
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
In the side poses here, I would personally always recommend using that back leg to push that front hamstring, that front leg hamstring out. You're going to get more from it. Even if you don't have the hamstring, you're going to get more of a drop from it. You can see here, I don't even need to see where his knee's positioned, but if I was on the side of him, there's a gap in between his knees, whereas in reality, if you were on the side of me posing on stage, my front knee should be trying to cross the back leg. Always try to mash them together is how I'd like to say it.
I got that. Here's a question. I'll give you guys briefly what I do, especially on the side shots, because we want some flex to the quad, but we don't want to flex the hamstrings, as Kyle's alluding to. We want that hamstring to drop, right? And when you flex the hamstring, as Phil was just mentioning a minute ago about flexing certain muscles, it's going to tighten it up and it's just going to flatten it right out. In terms of the quad, I actually take this foot, the leading foot, and I try to like push it forward just a little bit, which activates the quads and allows you to also stay on the glute, which I think might have forgotten to flex. But then if you practice this enough, and it does take practice, guys, you can basically deprogram or deregulate the activation on your hamstring to let that drop nicely. And like Kyle's saying, you want that knee into the adductor hamstring to get that drop a little bit more. Do you guys have anything to add about the foot setup?
Well, there's a little tip that I like to throw in as far as compressing the legs together. So a lot of people will do just like Kyle said, they'll cross the knees, but they're still not compressing the hamstring right. And the reason is because you actually use the adductor to press into the hamstring to pop the hamstring out, but the adductor is higher up on the leg. So they're not compressed towards the top. So it might sound funny, but I tell them, try to put your balls in your lap. Like you need to have your legs compressed all the way up. I mean, I guess with that, up your taint, whatever you want to call it. But you got to be compressed all the way up to get that adductor pressed out into the hamstring to get that hamstring to pop. And as Kyle said, there's definitely a gap there if you're viewing from the side.
Phil just wants to talk about taints and pee holes today, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do want to point out, this guy's got some pretty nice calves going on. Those things are rocking. I got another set of pics here. Let me pull that up real quick. We got a back shot. I think we're going to have some comments on the back shot.
I think his condition was actually the worst from the side. It was better front and back.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I'll lead on this because, I'm not going to say the front is in shape, but the front does not match the back at all, or I should say the back does not match the front. This is a case where, and guys, and I know all these other two coaches stress the same thing, you don't look at your good body part that's in shape, you look at your worst body parts, because you're not in shape until that bad body part is just as conditioned as the rest of the body. And we all know different genetic programming, male-female differences, we all hold body fat just a little bit differently. And I would say this guy's got a solid physique. I think all around he's got a solid physique. And if he was dieting for another 5 or 6 weeks and got that back shredded, I think I'd be giving him a lot of praise right now. And the only thing we'd be talking about is some posing tweaks. But Kyle, what do you see here?
I'd agree. Conditioning-wise, this is a 6-week out look. 6 hard weeks of dieting. I think in the back pose, I see on the glutes are friendly injections, right? Which is why we advise, I think we mentioned in the last episode, to just be mindful of that, because despite not being quote-unquote peeled, you can still see it. It's an eyesore. So even if he was in the shape that I believe he can get in with more time, that would be even more of an eyesore and take away from all the hard work, right? So I think he's got muscle. Obviously, everyone could use a little bit more muscle, but I think ultimately he's got some good lines. He just needs to get into a little bit more shape, not worry about losing a little bit of muscle to kind of get to where he needs to be for competition.
I think one thing to draw some attention to is, remember the first set of pics that we saw when we talked about his legs, and look at his legs here. They don't look as detailed, but look, because they're closer and he's not pushing the knees apart as much, they look bigger. They look more complete.
Now, and to add to that point, which also tells us to what I was saying a minute ago, a 5-6 week out look here, because like Phil's saying, if you're not knocking those knees out, you're not, I call it riding the pony or riding the horse, we all have different terms we use, but that conditioning would be evident to us with the sartorius and the adductors and all the different tissues that we want to see come out on show day. If he was like 5 to 6 weeks leaner and just pushed it, I don't know if this was like the first show of the season for him, and I don't even know the name of the show. I probably should have. Actually, it wasn't listed. But I really do think this guy could be a really good bodybuilder. It's just he needs to get tighter and fix a few posing tweaks.
He's built very well.
That's what I mean. He's got a good frame. Do you guys want to see the plan now? Or anything more to say about? All right. So, and the other reason why I'm going to come up with a form for these is because we're getting different, like varying levels of information. Some really good detail, some just macros, and with no emphasis on like where they're putting their calories, where they're placing carbs and whatnot. Coach Sam he's 25 years old. He was 93 to 94 kilos, which is, let's see, that's about, is that 100 and...
2.2.
What is it?
Conversion's like 2.2. So.
Is it, yeah, but is it about 200 pounds, give or take?
It's about 206, and he's 5'8".
5'8", okay. 5'8", 206. So his startup prep weight was 102. So we came down 9 kilos, we'll say 24 to 25 pounds? Okay. So,
yeah.
207.
Okay. So 17, 18 pounds, basically. Okay.
It's around 20,
So I think we were all in agreement that, maybe another 10 to 12 pounds needed to come off to be completely shredded. I should say 10 to 12 pounds to hit like your bottom weight of completely empty, shredded dry, and then on stage maybe you carb back up another 5-6 pounds depending on the situation. But so his start diet.
I think we should clarify. I think we should clarify where that 12 pounds is coming from. So when we say 12 pounds, we don't mean 12 pounds of body fat. We're talking about associated water that comes with that body fat as well. So when you lose body fat, there's going to be water associated that's going to come off with it. That looks just like body fat. So, that 12 pounds isn't going to be entirely body fat, but it's going to be a very good portion of body fat.
For sure. All right. So start diet. He started 20 weeks out for this prep. At 3,000 calories, 350 protein, 290 carbs, 50 fat. And his ending diet, which I'm going to assume the ending diet is basically that same, maybe it's 1 week out from the show, okay, before he starts his peak. And he was at 2,100 calories, 350 protein, 70 carbs, and 36 fats. Right off the bat, to me, I don't like to start people that low on their diet because you just don't have much to pull from. There's not many cards to play in the diet deck. What do you guys think?
Phil?
Well, see, I agree with Andrew. We talked about this on the last episode. Like, I call it sneaking in calories to try to get the total higher, get the metabolic rate going. And like Andrew said, I probably would have tried to go a lot higher than 290 grams of carbs because you don't have a lot to pull down at that point, So if you could be in reasonable condition and have carbs higher, and I'm pretty sure he could do it because I've had people that are, straight endomorphs, so like they really struggle, start prep on 500 grams of carbs. So I'm pretty sure he could have been higher than this.
That's the thing, because I'm thinking, okay, he's a heavyweight. This would be the lowest amount of calories starting that I've ever had a heavyweight. That's
a good point. I didn't think of that. He's a heavyweight, yeah.
Yeah, like most of my heavyweights, they're probably in the 5,500 when we start a diet. I'm just going to say on average. There are some outliers that are higher, some outliers that are a little bit lower, but, I would say I wouldn't necessarily want to start a diet with a heavyweight, anything less than 4,400 calories. What about you? You got a lot of good guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to range depending on the individual. It seems, one thing I want to clarify when we get these pictures to assess, I think a great additional thing we'll request is the starting picture, so we kind of see the composition from day one. That's a great idea. Because sometimes people are 20 weeks out and they weren't lifting at all, right? So of course their food's not high, but they also didn't have any muscle, so then they recomped a little bit. And in other instances, maybe they were just too heavy to start in a very poor starting place. In regards to the calories, yes, I ideally would see that be a little bit higher. I feel that is definitely, if he was 20% body fat and only eating that's a little concerning. Makes me believe maybe there was some type of thyroid issue, or maybe the person, again, just wasn't really following a diet. So that starting diet facilitated some off the rip because they were eating a lot of junk. They weren't actually calculating or tracking anything potentially. True. I don't know. As I look past it, the one thing it seems evident to me, at least the way I set up diets, I think about metabolic adaptation. If you're just eating the same thing every day, regardless if you're training or not training, usually you're going to stall. So he only came down, we said, 17 pounds. Obviously, that's not a lot to be dropping in a prep for a heavyweight. Usually you're thinking 25, 30 pounds probably from stage. But again, if he was just simply taking away a little bit of carbs one week, a little bit of fats another week, your body's going to adapt very quickly for the most part, for most people. So to only lose 900 calories over the course of 20 weeks, that's not much of a deficit in my opinion. In terms of, I guess, to go back to what you had said earlier, I think because he wrote 8-week out diet, same as end diet, maybe he's 8 weeks out or 7 weeks out as he listens to this. So he could potentially be benefiting from us giving him a guidance on how to proceed here.
For sure. This also brings up another point, only because I did this for a consult for a client last night about, she just finished her pro season and she's getting ready. I want to fix my hormones. I also want to get huge. I want to grow and get stronger. I don't want to take PEDs. I do want to take all these PEDs. Like, give me some direction, right? And I think a really good idea would be for us to do an episode on how to set yourself up for your next prep. And in my mind, it starts the day after you get off stage from your last show. Because we all know, in that first 3-4 weeks, if you blow it, your next prep is going to be harder. I can guarantee that 1,000%, that your next prep, because you just put on a bunch of unwanted fat, your metabolism hasn't recovered. You still have hormone dysfunction, male or female, and it's just setting yourself up for a harder prep, or at least a longer off season to do the right things to get yourself in position to prep the next time.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. A lot of times when people will come out of a show and they binge and they put on body fat, the body will shift its responses too. So it makes it a lot harder. I know I had a very, very hard time the one time that I did that. I was ready for my show, then I put some body fat back on because I didn't want to hold the condition. I was trying to add some size, and then coming back down, I'm just sitting there going, why isn't my body responding like it normally does? So you've got, stress to your health, which eating a bunch of junk and putting body fat back on is not a good idea, and it's not good for your health. And then, you kind of mess with your responses as well, because as we talked about on previous episodes, we're always trying to prime a response that we want for the future. And if you do that, now you've got to go backwards before you can even think about priming a response. So as far as how much he dropped from the beginning of the diet to the stage, like you guys said, he didn't drop very many calories. And I would imagine, based on his composition on stage, he probably stalled out for a good period numerous times. Probably the coach should have made some changes sooner. I see that he said he dropped the coach later on in the PED section. But how much cardio was he doing? Do we have that in here?
We don't see that.
I didn't see that, and I copied everything that was in the email. Oh, I did not see cardio. I'm going to assume that he probably was someone that had to do like 90 minutes a day towards the end just to get in the shape he was in. And again, that comes down to, and I'm not saying like no one ever has to do that, but I think a lot of times it comes down to not setting up your diet in the off season and the pre-prep phase leading into the prep. Go ahead, Phil.
We see a lot of errors on the coach's part when it comes down to getting peeled for a show, because the coach I find a lot of coaches, because we know that clients will talk and blame us after the show if we don't do things right or if they lose and whatnot. So the coaches are kind of afraid to do things that are aggressive, because the person's gonna be like, he put me on too much T3, he gave me too much cardio, he cut too many carbs. And, from conversation I had with Shane Hughley, we were talking about yesterday, great conversation. He said, I'm going to do what's necessary based on what you're doing. If I've got to continually cut you down, I'm going to do it. If you got to do 3 hours of cardio, I'm going to do it. It's whatever gets you in shape. I don't care what the end result is as far as what the program looks like. If we got to do it, we got to do it. Otherwise, you're just not going to be in shape. So I think a lot of coaches hesitate to cut the calories down lower. I think they hesitate to put more cardio in just simply because they're worried that the client's disgruntled. They're going to say something, but you can't concern yourself with that, because ultimately you're not going to have a client that complains that won the show or that showed up in their best shape. So regardless of what you had them do, if they look great, they're not going to complain.
How often do you guys get someone that asks you, you can tell they're probably pretty new to the sport, but they ask you a question like they're inquiring about coaching, and they're like, so what style of coach are you in terms of diet and cardio? Do you have someone do a lot of cardio? And for me, it's always it takes what it takes. I would love to say you're going to do 0 cardio and 5,000 steps a day, and you have refeeds every third day, and never have your carbs drop below 250. But that's a unicorn dream, really. There's varying levels all in between. But for me, I just say it takes what it takes, and that might be another T-shirt for us, by the way.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with a coach about this as well. It's just, you've got to do what you've got to do. It doesn't matter, what it looks like at the end, as long as the person's in shape, as long as the person's healthy, as long as everything's going. Listen, if you're cardioing the hell out of them and they're telling you their legs are beat to shit, then obviously, you've got to do something about that. If their metabolism is stalled, you've got to do something about the diet, But if it's continually working and you keep pulling it down and you're seeing results, then you've got to keep going with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the training. He was training 5 days a week. It looks like a pretty common split in some ways, though I don't like what I'm seeing towards the bottom. But chest and front delts and side delts. So chest and delts, day 1. Back and rear delts, day 2. Hamstring and triceps, day 3. quads and biceps day 4, and then hamstrings alone for a 5th session. Phil, what do you think about that? Like, give me I know you got some thoughts.
I think his training is terrible. First of all, I saw the thing that said 5 sets of each exercise, 7 to 8 exercises. That's ludicrous volume. You're not recovering from that. You're probably elevating cortisol. You're screwing up your metabolism. You're doing a million things wrong with that. I don't know who set that up, but that's one of the worst trainings I've ever seen in any prep, honestly. The way he has the body parts organized, I don't like. A lot of them are conflicting. A lot of them are crossover. A lot of them, there's just not going to be any room for recovery. The hamstrings, quads, and then hams again, I don't even understand that.
Me neither. That one got me pretty hard. Kyle, what are your thoughts?
I think the training is a bit poor. Obviously, I don't know when the rest days are, but just based on, looking at his body part, his hamstrings didn't seem to be underdeveloped compared to some other things. So I think it's not the frequency thing, it's more of an execution thing for legs in general. As far as Phil touched on, some interesting pairs. Can I see people sneaking in more frequency if they're trying to build up a body part? Sure, right? I've had people touch arms a little bit on a leg day or something like that, but it depends. Like, if the person's doing 8 exercises per training 5 sets, I mean, how much sets can you do?
35 to 40 sets of volume per workout.
It just seems a bit much. Now, I can assume this gentleman is not doing 40 sets to failure. So, again, what someone quantifies as a set to me, sometimes I have clients that I'll write 4 sets of 15, and another client that they're friends with has 1 set of 15, and the person will say, hey, coach, how come so-and-so has 4 sets of 15, I only have 1? Is he going to make more gains? And I say, because you only need 1 set, and he needs 4 of his shitty sets to equate to your 1 set. Yeah. So take that for what it is. Yeah. So that's obviously a variable that we don't know. I don't see training videos and things like that, but it seems like a little bit much.
Yeah, your point being is that in the end it kind of comes down to semantics, right? Because let's say client B that you mentioned, he's doing that 1 set of 15 to all-out failure, and let's say he did 3 sets of 15 leading up to that, but there are more proprioception and kind of activation sets to get him into the mind-muscle talking, to get his nervous system ready to hit that all-out set of 15. So is that 1 set of 15 or is that 4 sets of 15? It's a matter of semantics, in my opinion.
Yeah. When I see sets, I'm thinking working sets.
That's what I think too.
That's what I assume, again, but everyone's a little different.
Yeah. I mean, who kind of maybe added a little confusion to it, though he kind of cleared it up with the RPE scale that he put on his programs with John Meadows. He would write like 4 sets of 10 working up to a top set of failure. And, and again, I asked the question, is that 4 sets of 10 or is that 1 set of 10 to failure with 3 activation sets? We would put an RPE scale on the sets, a different number that would equate to, okay, you have 2 reps left in the tank, you have 4 reps left in the tank. So you get a good idea of how you should be activating on your way up to that top set. But okay, so we've spoken on training, covered diet, covered his picks. Let's talk about his PEDs. So he started the cycle about 20 weeks out, 500 milligrams of test E per week, 400 milligrams of mast E, 100 milligrams of Tren. Tren E, sorry. That got me for a second. I know it's horrible, but I've learned from it and left the previous coach. All right, so right off the bat, I don't know about you guys, I don't have a problem with the first 4 weeks of the cycle with adding trenbolone in. I know it used to be a taboo thing, but I think for the last 3 or 4 years, not to a T, but I've had a lot of guys start off, want to get that positive nitrogen retention, want to get some insulin sensitivity off the bat. What do you guys think about adding Tren in out of the gate?
Well, I always add Tren in out of the gate, but then I pull it. I won't leave it in for 16, 20 weeks. So what I try to do is I try to get a jump out of the gate, like you said, and try to get kind of like a head start and get like a nice solid reaction and response. Kind of like extra credit, puts us ahead, gives us a cushion, and then I pull it out. So after you've pulled it out, I switched to, more gentler compounds like a Test DECA, Test EQ, off-season type stuff, And one of the reasons I think I'm not going to be able to pull this trick anymore because I think too many people know about it now, but I consistently make people hold water in that middle period of prep because they think they're fatter than they are. So then they're going to work harder. And then when I pull it out, it's like, oh my God, I'm leaner than I thought. I actually, when I first taught my prep class, one of my clients who had just won a show was in there. And when he heard me say that, he goes, you mother. I'm like, yeah. I did it exactly that reason.
I can see that. Kyle, do you start preps off with Tren ever?
In the past, I have. Going to today, I'm much more conservative with things. 400 Tren. I couldn't tell you the last person I had take 400 Tren in a week.
Trent E, which compounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that to me is it's a lot. I used to use higher dosages than I use now, right? So if you have anyone on the any of the popular guys that I work with, I start trend lower than anyone starts trend. Generally, you get results from it. People just don't want to think they're going to get results from it. That's the problem, because we live in a world where people think more is better, more drugs, more training, etc. As far as can I see it being a viable option to start, I wouldn't start with Trend E. I would start with Trend A if I was going to use it. Generally 4 weeks to maybe kickstart if I didn't like where the person's composition was, and then I would definitely pull it out. Using mass the whole time, I mean, that's okay, I guess, right? Again, is it the approach I would use? Generally, no, because I try to have my guys a little bit leaner from day one.
Yep.
Or I prefer Primo maybe in the beginning and then switching over to mass or something like that. So that's my take on it, to answer your question.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
I actually have a question. I have a question for you, Andrew. I have
Yeah.
a question for you because, Andrew, I know you specialize in thyroid. Like, you know a lot about the thyroid and the complexities from like a medical standpoint and a scientific standpoint. So I was going to say something about what I saw here and just tell you, correct me if I'm wrong or correct me if I'm missing something, because, I mean, I would defer to you on this one. But using 100 micrograms of T4 and then 25 of T3, I think we actually talked about this in chat recently. Why would somebody use T4 when T4 has the possibility of converting to reverse T3? Whereas if you use regular T3, that possibility doesn't exist.
Brings up a couple points, because almost all my clients know that I do a detox with them to make sure their liver's running properly before we start a prep, because everything happens through your liver. Drug detoxification, fat loss, conversion to T4 to T3, the majority of it happens in the liver and the kidneys. So, I mean, there's several reasons you want to keep T4 in. There's actually some brain, some satiety, and feelings of well-being, I believe is how it's described in the research article that I read, and I think I sent it to you guys. But typically, it's not that you want to always have some balance, right, between your T4 and T3 levels. You don't want to just have rocket high levels of T3 because you're sending mixed signals to your brain, you know? I'll leave it at that because we could do a whole deep dive into it, but generally you do want to keep some form of T4 in there throughout the prep, for sure.
So what you're saying is you want to mirror the body's natural process as much as you can.
You said it better than I did, but yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
I just think, this seems like, I presume at 16 weeks out he was using the same coach, but maybe the coach looks at T3 as a fat burner, which it is not. But a lot of people use it as such. But to start prep, ideally you don't need any thyroid medication when you're starting prep. That is how you should be starting your prep if your thyroid's not functioning, right? If we don't see your TSH, which I consider that the top line after, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, that connection, the signaling, if that is off to begin with, you have a problem, right? Is there inflammation in the body? What's going on? Then from there, the synthesis side of things, are we producing enough T4 based on that signaling? And then we look at more so, again, the conversion, the absorption, utilization, and things like that. So from day one, your thyroid should be in a good spot. That's when I get people to get lab work, let's just say 22 to 24 weeks out. Where is everything at? If things are not in the right spot, I'm not starting them in prep because it's going to be a recipe for disaster. If you need T3 at 25 micrograms at 16 weeks out, there's a problem. There's something wrong. You're either eating way too fucking much food and you're trying to offset it with more thyroid hormone, or again, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You think it's a fat burner.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Guys, when good coaches add T3 into the plan, this is a replacement dose, right? Because your thyroid has been down-regulated based off of the stimulus that it's receiving. Stimulus being less calories, more cardiovascular. The body is in a save me mode, right? It's going to start to decrease your metabolism. That you're really just adding some replacement in. You're not trying to use it as a fat burner. If you're using it as a fat burner, I'll go as far as to say that you're using it as a muscle burner as well.
That's actually another very good point. That the fact that T3 doesn't discriminate calories, so you're much more susceptible to fat loss when you start using synthetic thyroid. I call T3 synthetic thyroid. That's what I call it because it's more relatable for people. And like you said, it's replacing what's being lost. You're just trying to keep it where it's supposed to be. You're not trying to shoot it through the roof unless there's really trouble with fat loss. But if you're having trouble with fat loss, again, it's not a fat burner. It just upregulates all the processes in your body that lead to burning fat. So it makes all the other stuff that will burn fat work at a faster and higher rate to make that happen at a better rate. If that makes sense.
All right, so it does make sense. Let's move on. So he kept this diet, and I misspoke when I said I I didn't think it was odd that he started off with Trent. I didn't realize he did the full 20 weeks at Trent. I should have read down a little further. So it sounds like he just started this compound, the stack, and just wrote it right through without any manipulation. I would be very weary of how his health was come 10 weeks out, 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, and then layering in 50 milligrams of Winstrol and 50 milligrams of Proviron per day. I don't know. For me, I don't know. I usually add Winstrol in at 5 or 6 weeks out. Proviron for me is usually like a finishing touches kind of thing. I want to see the athlete basically peeled before I add Proviron, halotestin, any of those other, we'll call them extras and exotics that might enhance or change the look a little bit. That's just the way I look at things. I always want to be, I don't ever want to fool myself with thinking the athlete is in better condition than they are because of PEDs that might make you look drier one day or harder in the gym pictures or whatnot. How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, well, first of all, one of the things I wanted to say, before I forgot to say it, is the reason why we have you guys not submit who your coach is, because we're tearing this plan apart. Like, this plan is, in my opinion, if I'm going to be honest, it's poorly planned. It doesn't show much structure. It doesn't show much knowledge. It doesn't show any knowledge of drugs. The training is bad. The diet wasn't manipulated properly. A lot of things were just programmed wrong. This guy looked, the way this guy looked, it's kind of surprising he looked that good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kyle, do you have anything to add about the orals?
Orals, I'll save plenty to the end. Generally, again, back in my heyday, I'd use things a little bit more, I don't want to say recklessly, but I would use them more before I kind of knew a lot more so about nutrition and just realizing that people don't want to do the work and do the cardio and train hard. So winning, I'll save to the end. It's not going to usually help people from a liver standpoint and overall standpoint. It's more of a cosmetic thing. Proviron, I will utilize that. That'd be like the first oral I put in, other than some type of maybe Novadex sometimes. I'll put that in first, generally speaking, just from a hormonal standpoint. Doesn't look like this guy used Halo or anything else. I was just reading that bottom part where he mentioned he used DHB for instead of Primo at 10 to 5. So it looks like this coach was going to put Primo in at 10 weeks out, which doesn't make sense to, again, go from mass to Primo. Like, why would you put Primo in toward the end and not mass? It doesn't make much sense to me. But I also don't see any, which is good, I guess. I don't see any AIs, though. For prep, I obviously want estradiol to drop a little bit as it would promote.
I would have had him in.
So I don't see anything, but again, I'd rather not see him make of 8x a day.
Yeah, I think we all, was it this week we saw a cycle, Phil, you shared that had what, like 1 or 2 milligrams of ADEX per day? Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Guys, if your coach is having you do that, like at 6 weeks out, I'll just say it right now, fire your coach. And I just think that's a one-way ticket to messing your lipids up really bad, and then you're going to compound it with other orals down the line. You're already taking PEDs. Your liver's already stressed enough, and I will go as far as to say there's probably a reason why your fat loss is slowing down. It's because of the compounding PEDs and the estrogen limiting supplements that you're taking, because you need some estrogen to burn fat. You need some estrogen to refeed for glycogen synthase. So trying to crush your estrogen 20 weeks out, 10 weeks out, not a good idea.
I think, Andrew, a question for you. With the trend usage, regardless if it's E or ACE, I don't care. It's trend, right?
Yep.
Do you ever see a point in using trend for 16 weeks?
No, never.
To me, again, it's just, and I see it, right? We see it from popular coaches. It just doesn't make much sense to me.
We were actually talking about that today.
I feel like people are depending on drugs to induce changes. So perhaps they don't have to pay attention as much and use T3 and trend to kind of yield more fat loss, I guess. It doesn't make sense. So when I see people ask, when's trend coming in? I want to put it in barely ever, okay? Yeah. And the more you ask me, the more I want to tell you to fuck off and go elsewhere.
You know that funny? I want to touch on that. Like, when you're a client and you're asking for drugs or you're asking for a free meal, or I'm going to tell you, the first thing that crosses my mind is like, nope, I'm not even going to entertain that idea. I'm going to push it back further than I wanted to, because let me be the composer of this orchestra that we're doing here. You hired me for a reason. I have a track record. These gentlemen have track records. And I'm not trying to say my way or the highway. It's just that we're all competent coaches. We give our clients crazy attention. From the stuff I hear about other people, we give our clients crazy attention compared to a lot of these other big name coaches out there. We've already considered these variables. We're not asleep at the wheel, and there's a reason why we don't want you running trend at 10 weeks out, 12 weeks out. We want to keep you healthy so that you want to stay with us and you don't have a story to tell about us.
Yeah, you know what's actually funny is you can probably pop this up on the screen later for when you do the podcast, but I actually posted this in my story. I shared this with you guys. One of my clients, who actually is a pretty good coach, said something to me. Said, "Do you think, like, are you sure about this with the carbs?" And my response was, "You know what? Now that you mentioned it, no, I'm not sure." And he just started laughing because he knew I was being sarcastic right away. I've never had a client say, "Do you think we should do this?" And I'm like, "You know what? I never thought of that. That's a good idea." We do this like repetitively. We do this constantly. We've done this thousands of times. Like, we're pretty sure we know the process. Like, if there was something we should be doing, we'd probably be doing it. You know, I don't like to lose, and I know you guys don't like to lose either. Like, I'm not gonna slack on your prep.
Yeah.
I think as the more I do this, the more health conscious I am in regards to, I would never want someone to look back in life and be like, "Hey, you knew this was reckless and you advised it." And again, when I coached earlier on, I probably used more dosages than I thought was needed. Just that's what I was learning, and that's what I thought was best.
We've all done that.
And then I realized that it's not. This person looks like shit regardless if they take 200 or 600. They still look like shit, right? And I use myself as an example in terms of trying to push certain things to offset the stress and the lack of sleep. It doesn't work. I'll put it that way. In terms of, you mentioned when you have a client ask you for a free meal or something, I think that's where that becomes really annoying sometimes, right? Because if I make a suggestion, regardless if it's to tell someone to eat or, hey, this is what I think you need to do, my suggestion is stemming purely from trying to achieve the goal at hand. This is how I think you should do it. At the end of the day, how I tell all the clients, you don't have to do this, right? If this is what I'm suggesting you should do, this is my opinion, I provide them with the why so they're not fucking stupid. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to do it, you're not comfortable, that's perfectly fine. We'll do a different approach. But I'm not going to let you manipulate and tell me what we should use and not use, what SARM should come in. Because at the end of the day, this is the way I'm doing it. If you don't like it, you're free to do whatever the hell you want. But just know, if we don't get the right end result, you can't say I didn't suggest something else that was not going to yield a different result.
No. 100%.
Yeah, so
I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum with that. I'm not the opposite end. Like, I'm on the far end of, like, telling them no. I guarantee the person that I'm about to talk about is going to watch this. But I had a client in prep that was, like, joking about a cheat meal. I was like, "Do I get a burger now?" And he goes, "Ha, ha, ha, I'm kidding." I'm like, "No, you're not kidding." I'm like, "Stop asking." So after he asked me the third time, I'm like, this is constantly on his mind. So I'm just going to negate the possibility in his mind. Like, now you'll never get a cheat the rest of this prep. So now you can forget about it. And he didn't. Like, all right, now you asked 3 times. It's on your mind too much. I don't want you even thinking about it or anticipating it or hoping for it. So we're just never going to do it. I'm going to tell you that now.
I mean, if we thought you needed to have a free meal, it probably would have been the first thing we wrote down in the response to you, right? I mean, between the 3 of us, we probably prepped, 3,000 people over the years? I mean,
yeah.
It's just speaking from the body of evidence that we have. It's not like we're trying to be sadistic or we're trying to be the boss. It's just that you tasked us with a job, and we're going to do that job the best way we know how, based off of our experiences on ourselves and working with the thousands of people. And with that, I say we move on to the next gentleman. Let me share. This is Martin Gomez. Really good physique, 212 Pro.
Great condition.
That's the first thing that popped out in my mind, too. Great condition.
I like to see.
Peaked properly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he has the best structure in the world, but he's maximizing the variables that he has. One, came and peeled, front, back, bottom, side, shredded glutes, shredded hamstrings. He checked that box. He doesn't have the best frame, but he's put on a good amount of muscle to maximize the tissue he can hold. I think a couple posy tweaks. I think he could drive those elbows forward a little bit more in that rear lat spread to get like another 2 to 3 inches in the width and depth of that
First
spread.
thing I was going to say.
Yeah, oh, sorry to steal your thunder. Go ahead and...
No. I was going to say Kyle mentioned it last week, so...
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. Then I stole Kyle's point. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, I mean, but what do you guys think? Kyle?
I think this is ideal conditioning. I think everyone should strive to be in this condition. It's definitely not possible for everyone, especially younger competitors. Very rarely are they going to get into this type of shape. That there's nothing wrong with his conditioning. Posing tweaks, sure, that would help. His issue is more of just needs a little bit more muscle in certain places for his frame, and that's where genetics play a role in trying to be advanced with your training. I look at his side tricep. I think he's just not hitting that shot very good. The camera's also not straight on. It's a little to the side. But obviously, we know how conditioned his abs were in the front most muscular. So when I see kind of like a softer the serratus oblique's not really sharp here. I know it's more of a posing thing, so maybe it's like hard for him to have the shoulder mobility to reach for that tricep, things like that. So that's my take on his conditioning. I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. I wish everyone could look like this. I wish I could look like that, but it's harder.
It doesn't feel good to look like that. It hurts.
Yeah.
You think being in shape hurts?
I think it hurt the hell out of me.
I think a lot of people, social media makes bodybuilding seem easy for many people.
Yeah.
And that's the brutal truth behind it. If we remove social media, 85% of competitors would never compete.
I
agree with that.
Say like 92 competitors would. Because, all right,
People,
I'm the only one I think that competed. Phil, when was your first show?
2000, late 2000s, 2003 or 4.
Okay, so you're up there too. How about you, Kyle? 10? Jeez, okay. Well, so me and Phil are old here. My first show was 2001. And back then, obviously, there's no social media. There's no cell phones even, right? YouTube wasn't a thing. So really, when you go to the gym, the only person that knew you were competing was like the one, maybe other bodybuilder or bodybuilding enthusiast in the gym. And it would be weird if you walked in there in a tank top and posed in front of the mirror. Everyone would stop and look at you like, what in the hell are you doing? So you stayed covered up, and then you went down to the basement lighting where they had a couple mirrors set up, and you hit your poses. We didn't take pictures back then because, of course, we didn't have cell phones. If someone happened to bring a Polaroid or something, maybe you had a few pictures that you could go home and put up on your wall, and we would circle, okay, this is what I got to work on. My lats suck. I got to get those out. And my hamstrings, you'd circle that. But that's what bodybuilding was. I just don't see this current generation of people knowing what we have now with the social media aspect. I don't think, I'll go as far as to say that like 96% of the people in it today would not be into what we do. What do you guys think?
I don't think that a lot of people, like Kyle said, a lot of people are not tough enough to do this. Like, they don't realize how hard this can actually be. And like I said before, I always try to prep my clients psychologically. No matter how bad you're picturing prep feeling to get peeled, it's going to be worse. So after you've felt it a few times, you'll notice like they handle it better, they get in shape better, their attitude's better, their energy is better because they know what to expect. But the first time, when you really don't know what to expect, it's so much worse than whatever you have dreamed up in your head.
I tell clients that unless you've gone through like BUDS training to be a Navy SEAL, this will be by far the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. Like, I don't care if you played college football. I don't care if you made it through Army basic training. Like, at least at Army basic training, you got to eat somewhat what you wanted, a burger and fries at the end of the day. There's a lot of cases in this sport where you've done 2 hours of cardio, you've done your training, and you're going home to, shrimp and salad and some veggies, no carbs, no fats, and that's just what it looks like. Let me share one more picture. I want to give him full credit. He looked really good in my opinion.
So again, props to his coach. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Were you his coach?
No.
You keep pulling these I'm like, maybe he snuck it in there as
He's got his hamstring flexed here on the side, I'll tell you that, and his legs aren't compressed.
Yeah. So that's something where he can fix for sure.
Yeah. Front
He's not posing the lat spread right at all. His shoulders need to be elevated a little bit. They're too far down. His elbows need to be up. His hands need to be higher. Probably could go knuckles into the side and create more of a dramatic taper. He is posing the side chest properly at the top. I can tell he's got the arm stuck out, just based on the orientation of the delt. He's got the proper orientation with the lean. Legs are great from the front. I mean, seeing his condition, like you brought up before, he probably could show the sartorius sartorius, but just as imposing the legs properly. But generally, this is pretty damn good.
I bet this was really wild to see in person under the lights at the Texas Pro.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times these pictures, sometimes they make an athlete look better. Sometimes they make him look just a little less conditioned than he is. I have a feeling that he was one of the more conditioned guys in the whole show, and he was probably a sight to behold. With that, let's break down his plan.
And that's another thing for people at home. Like, a lot of people like to judge shows based on the pictures they see online. And they're like, oh, well, I think it went this way. And people always tell them, you've got to be in person to really see it, because you can't see the things that are flickering when they're moving. You can't see the little details. You can't see the texture. There's a lot of things you can't see. You can't see the depth of their muscles because pictures are 2D. So, there's a lot of things that you can't take into consideration that the judges might see that you don't see.
All right, so his diet, it looks like he started his prep at 15 weeks out. I'm going to go on a limb and say he probably started his diet or his prep in, proper condition. It looks like he's eating a good amount of food overall, like 100 grams of cream of rice and an English muffin and 120 grams of berries for meal 1. That's not a light breakfast. It looks like he's got fruit in almost every meal, which I like to see personally for the nutrients.
Yeah.
He's got an intra-workout in there. Yeah, I mean, what do you 125 grams of oats at that last meal?
Good amount of insulin.
Yeah, there's some insulin in there. There's nothing wrong with that. What do you guys think?
So I think that one thing to point out here is the 10 I use of Lantus, I'm not sure if that's due to a high dose of GH trying to compensate for insulin resistance or whatnot, or if you're trying to have like a retatrutide type effect, right? A little bit more insulin relative to all the meals you're eating is going to have a retatrutide type effect. So obviously it's going to make you leaner, it's going to keep you a little fuller, it's going to keep your IGF elevated a little bit more. And then he's got Humalog into the pre-workout and the post-workout meals. So what that tells me is that he probably started prep in really good shape, right? Because the coach doesn't seem concerned about body fat. When he's getting, he's putting insulin in 3 different points in the day. He's even got fats in there with the macadamia nut oil with the insulin, right? So that tells me this guy might have a faster metabolism. He's probably in pretty good shape year round. Probably started prep pretty lean, because otherwise I wouldn't have chanced that personally. But in certain circumstances, it is okay.
Let's see. So it looks like he changed his diet at 8 weeks out, and I don't think he made other diet changes. Which I get if maybe people aren't sending us every diet change, because we all have clients where sometimes we're changing the diet every 3 days or every week. Based off what we're seeing, especially towards the end. But if he only stuck with a 15-week and then an 8-week diet change, and that got him into shape, kudos to himself and his coach.
I always say the less changes a coach makes to the diet, it just means that the coach was more on point with the accuracy. Because what happens is if you get into the phase where you're building muscle, metabolism's faster, then you get leaner, and it's a continual cycle. You get leaner, sensitivity elevates, partitioning gets better, your muscles are now getting more of those calories. You build some muscle, metabolism's higher, you burn more body fat. So if I can get through a prep, and I try to do this with like 3-4 changes, I consider that a really good prep. But there's been preps where I've had to make 12 changes before, it just happens.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about you guys, but when I get to a certain point, I kind of take prep 3 days at a time with people, so they're checking in 3 to 4 times a week. And I know, you guys are good coaches, you have your own systems, but you probably do something similar where, and a lot of times it's, okay, I want to see what this refeed does for you, or I want to see what this 3-day low period or whatever it might be does for you. And it gives us information as to, are we on the right track? For me, like whenever I get a check-in, it's literally like a 3-way fork in the road where, going down the middle is just keep doing what you're doing. Everything's great. We're dropping at a clip, whatever. Then the other decision is, do we need to push harder or do we need to pull back? To me, it just ends up becoming a binary decision when prep is slowed down. And I know people will be like, well, that obviously, duh. But to me, it's like, if you really break it down that way to, do I need to go harder or do I need to pull back? Are my adrenals messed up? Have I been doing too much cardio? Am I beat to hell? Do I need a deload of some sort? I think those are the questions you need to ask yourself as a coach when you're evaluating your client's check-in. This diet at 8 weeks out, it looks like,
I'm seeing a lot of similarities to what I like to do, especially with food combinations and timing. There's a lot of similarities in here to what I like to do. So obviously I'm going to like it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he only had 2 carb-free meals at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken. We have the hindsight of knowing that it worked. So,
right.
Based off the picture, the visuals. So I'm going to say the diet worked great. Everyone that's listening to this, just copy this exact diet and you're going to be peeled for your next show.
Somebody's going to try that.
I know they are. Okay, training. So progressive overload principles, 2 top sets per exercise, about 4 to 5 exercises per body part. So looks like he did a Monday push, a Tuesday pull, Wednesday he went specific with quads, Thursday rest, Friday upper, and then Saturday hams and glutes. So it looks like he hits his legs twice basically with a quad focused day, and then he hits his upper body twice between push and pull specific days, and then a general upper day. This seems like I think like a very similar to like a JP split that I've seen recently.
Well, JP is push pull, but I don't think he does the second half with the upper and the hams and the glutes. He just pretty much sticks with push pull legs. This is actually again structured very similar to something I would do and something that I do. Okay,
so you like this coach? Maybe he's an apprentice.
That'd be funny if it was, because it's very similar. Like the diet now and this. Is the thing, like if I could search, we could put one of my programs up here and you'll see the diets are very similar. Maybe we'll put that in. And the training, again, is really, like, the split is structured similarly. Now, I don't think I would do 4 or 5 exercises per body part. That's a bit much. But the rest of it, I like.
I mean, well, so let's talk about real quick, like, let's say we're talking legs in general. And, like, do you guys consider training, like, the adductor machine, like, an exercise in terms of, like, yeah, it's an exercise. But I'm saying, like, that's not the exercise that's going to drain me. Like, it's not a hack squat. It's not a leg press. It's not barbell squats. So I kind of put it on this lower tier where, okay, if we need to bring up the adductors, then that's definitely going to be programmed in. But not everyone's getting that. And I'm not counting that necessarily as, like, one of our 4 working exercises. How do you guys feel about that?
What do you think, Kyle?
So directly to answer that, I mean, the adductors, obviously, it's an exercise. It could be somewhat taxing, depending on how much volume or intensifiers. But generally, if I was programming quads, I'm doing 4 other movements.
Well, let's pretend it's on a ham glute day, for instance, you know.
If they need work on their adductors, yeah, I'll throw it in the beginning or the end, something like that. But do I consider it as like something that's ultimately going to be the reason why the person's legs are so heavy and they're tired? No, I don't think so.
Let me phrase it a different way. Like, do you think they're sitting up the night before getting anxious and nervous about thinking about coming in and hitting that adductor machine versus, shit, I did 8.5 plates on the hack squat for 10 reps last week and I want to get 11, or I want to do 10 3/4? You get my point of what I'm saying? Like, do you think it's creating the same level of anxiety as you walk into the gym? Or is it kind of like, yeah, you're going to attack the exercise, don't get me wrong, but is it more of it's there? Like, to me, it's almost like sometimes I like to do a hard exercise and then do adductors and then go back to another super hard exercise, kind of giving my nervous system a quick break from just the mental, craziness of trying to hit some top weights and top sets. That's what I'm trying to get at.
You know who likes to do something like that? I believe, hopefully I'm right on this, but like I like to do, like I'll do a heavy compound, and then if I'm really working on quads and I really want quality quads, I'll do leg extension second, but I'll say take it serious, go heavy. I think Hunter Labrada does that. I think that's his second exercise in the leg workout, and people think that it's like an isolation exercise. It can build a lot of muscle. It can be very effective, especially for separation, because it hits the rectus femoris very, very heavy. So I think that what you just said is a phenomenal idea at certain times, depending on what it is that you need to do. Yeah. And like John used to say, he actually would have everybody lead the leg workouts with a ham curl. That's what me and Kyle always did when we trained together. Yeah. We trained together, all of, I think, for a large part of 2016, and first thing we did was hams, and then we went to go warm up in quads and squats and all of that stuff, but the first thing we did was hams. Now, I want to make a point about the adductors real quick, because people don't really relate to the anatomical structure of it. So I'm going to use very simple terms instead of complex terms, because the majority of our listeners aren't going to be well versed in this. So the adductors kind of fan out. So we have a couple heads of the adductor that are more lateral, more horizontal, and we have some that are more vertical, right? So the vertical ones are the ones that are actually bigger muscle bellies. So what people don't realize is if you're really trying to hammer your adductors, you want to be doing like leg press type movements for very big adductors. Now, a lot of people think that that's hams, and I will still say to my clients, I want you to feel your hams, because I know that they don't know that, and it's not like a common thing for them to understand. But if I tell them hams, they're looking to feel that general region, right? But what you're really feeling usually on a leg press that you think is your hams is your adductors. But you could also hit your hams to an extent, but again, because the knee is flexing and the hip is flexing, the length of the hamstring isn't changing a whole bunch, so you're not getting a lot of stimulus, but you are getting some. But the majority of that stimulus you're getting on that posterior side is your adductors. So like a lot of people will go to the adductor machine to really grow their adductors, but that's not the biggest heads of the adductors. That's just the ones that are highest up towards the hip. If you want the part of the adductors that really runs down closer to the knee, you've got to do more like leg press type movements.
That's actually a really good point that I think gets lost on a lot of people. All right, let's look at the drugs. Everyone just wants to fast forward to this part, right? 15 weeks out. Looks like a very basic cycle, 750 Testi, 600 Primo, 300 NPP at 15 weeks out. And then at 8 weeks out, he drops to Test P at 100 milligrams per day. Masteron propionate, 150 milligrams every day. He adds Trenin at 50 milligrams every day, and Winstrol at 50 every day. Thus far, what do you guys think? Changes? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
Well, I think you should lead this one, because we've been leading on the others.
Whoops. Why did I do that? There we go. I mean, again, we have the hindsight of saying, well, it worked, and the dude showed up in excellent shape.
Doesn't mean it could have been done better. Like we could still give our ideas and our scrutiny.
True. I just don't like to break things down if the end product came out okay. But I'll give a little 2 cents. 8 weeks out for starting Tren is early for me. I'm the one that's always, like we were talking a minute ago, hey coach, what do you think about adding Tren in now? And I'm like, not yet. I'll tell you when. It's kind of like what's that meme where he's like hold? Oh, it's Braveheart, right? And he's like, hold. And I think I actually made a meme of this a couple of years ago. And then, like, all of a sudden, he's like, Tren.
That's funny.
And all the guys, start firing and all that. But anyway, this is a little early for Tren for me. It's also a little early for Winstrol for me. I like to save those goodies for later on in the prep. I like 100 milligrams of Test P every day. Mass P, I'm not opposed to 150 milligrams every day. Sometimes I don't like to do a higher ratio of a DHT to a testosterone for a lot of for most athletes, unless they come to me with experience and they have pictures, body of work that says, hey, I do really good with DHTs and a lower test base. What do you think, Phil?
Well, I like to lead prep with Tren, but again, we don't know what kind of condition he was in, so I don't even know if that was necessary. Now, as far as 8 weeks out, I will go with Tren at 8 weeks out. I'm probably more aggressive with Tren than you guys are, simply because I like to use it for muscle retention. So, like at 8 weeks out, I'll probably do 100 milligrams every other day, right? Which is exactly what he's doing, 50 every day, right? I like to try to minimize injections and minimize volume. So, like, I don't like to test probe this far out because it's a CC every day. Whereas we could use something that's concentrated at 250 milligrams per ml, and we could use half that amount of oil and not really load them up and, start creating sore body parts in areas that are full and they're running out of places to put it. And there's injection trauma every single day. I don't like that. I don't add orals in that early. So the Winnie definitely don't like that because, again, like you mentioned, the liver plays a very big part in all of our vital processes. And I've told this story in other podcasts. Like I had a guy come to me who had a phenomenal physique. He's 6 weeks out. He's like, I just can't get lean or take over. And I'm sitting there going, this guy's going to make me look like a hero. And then sends me his blood work, and his AST and ALT is 400. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to be able to get peeled. Your liver's not functioning. That's what's going to dictate you being able to do this. You can't do it. He's like, he figured he'd try anyway, and he pulled out 2 weeks later. But, that's a good take home for everybody. You might like orals. Yes, they do work very well. They work very acutely. They give you good stimulation, central nervous system stimulation, gives you a good push in the gym, but it could really compromise your function at the end. If your liver's stressed out at the end, you're not going to get peeled. So I don't like the orals that far out. I don't like the everyday injection simply because, again, I'm trying to minimize injections as much as possible. Just for that injection trauma and scar tissue buildup. You got to think about it. No matter how thin the needle is, every time you put that in, you're creating scar tissue. So it accumulates over the years. Like my side delts used to be so strided, you could run your fingers along it and feel the striations. And then at the end of my career, there was no line there at all, because just so much scar tissue built up that the striations were completely gone, So you're going to lose striations when you inject an area too much and create too much scar tissue. Like we see a lot of guys who have their lower glutes or glutes are peeled, but there's no lines in the upper glutes because where they put all the gear forever, So I try to minimize that as much as I can. Now into the final weeks, test probe at 100 every. See, I'm one of those guys who doesn't like to go high test in the final 4 weeks. A lot of people do. A lot of coaches do that, and that's okay. It depends on. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But I feel like if we're using something like that, and you're creating more potential for aromatization, now we have to combat that aromatization. Whereas if I keep your test down, I don't have to go crazy on the AIs because I'm not combating anything, right? And like you mentioned, we're not going to mess with cholesterol and mess with their health and mess with their moods and everything else in their joints by going high on the AIs because we have test high. So if I bring the test down, it's going to be that much. You're going to need that much less AIs, and it's going to be more effective.
So you're saying not only more effective, but also healthier and safer for the athlete.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the long run. Okay.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. Kyle, what do you think?
So the everyday injections, I have no problem with that. I want to keep blood levels as stable as possible, generally speaking. In terms of Tren, again, the earliest I'm using it generally is 8 weeks out, not at 50 every day. That's like a weekly dose for me there. In regards to the one thing I like a lot, being the AI in at the end, again, AIs work very, very quickly. So if this person didn't need it, awesome, fantastic, right? Even better for your health. Put it in when you need it from a cosmetic benefit generally. As far as the clen, I don't think I would have started at 80 at 3 out. I would have started maybe at 40 for a gentleman and then slowly titrated up as, the beta receptors kind of deregulate there. or downregulate. What else do we have here? Winstrol, I ate out. I've seen it. Again, as I just alluded to before, I'm going to do, Andrew, I kind of wait on that. If I'm going to use an oral, it's going to be like Proviron or something like that. Generally, it's more mild. The Halo at 3 ounce, the earliest I'd put Halo in, especially at 30 milligrams of true Halo, can change a person, let's just say, in terms of their mood and overall output. But yeah, not terrible.
If I have a crazy person, I won't even put a Halo in. If I have a crazy person or a person who's got like a delicate job that's based on their personality, I won't put it in.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would do differently, which I guess this person might have did kind of, but as I put Tren in and I raise the Tren dosage, I will lower the test dosage.
Same. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
a good way to titrate up and down. You know.
I try to have a load that I understand what the person's load is, what I'm looking to use with this person, right? So we do some simple math, just looking at the injectables at 8 weeks out, they're at
700.
give or take.
1,700.
Am I doing quick math?
About 22. Yeah, 22.
Give or take. So in my head, okay, this is where I'm going to keep this person. I'm not going to go and say, let's put the mass to 200, the Trend to 100, let's add in something else, because it doesn't make much sense. It's now stress on the body, and stress on the body, as we know, is going to lead to low-grade chronic inflammation, things like that are going to create issues in our body. So I'm glad that I don't really see that changing here. Obviously, the orals come in at the end, finish the job, and it appeared to do very well, which is the most important part here.
That's another good point, that if somebody's looking good, don't overhaul the PED program. I've had points where I programmed the PEDs from the very beginning, but if I see them responding to something, and I have another block that's coming that's going to change all those PEDs around, but everything is looking great, I'll change that block back to what I had them doing. Because why would I change what's already making them look great?
Keep it simple, stupid, right?
I think coaches overthink that. Like, they change things when they shouldn't change things.
Well, I'll be honest, like how many times, even if, let's say you don't know if the person's credible or not credible yet, but you hear so-and-so is using a different drug, or like something or whatever, or a certain dosage mechanism, or some way to dose it, and it makes you stop and think, wait, am I doing something wrong? Is there a better way? Which I think is good. It keeps us on our toes as coaches to really think about protocols, compounds, how they react with the stage of the prep that the athlete is in. I'm not saying I run with those things, but I'm saying it does, when I hear that so-and-so coach is doing something, it makes me think, okay, let's backtrack and reverse engineer. Why are they doing that? Was it to counteract an issue they saw, or is this a standard practice that's yielding better results over and over again? That's kind of how I look at it.
See, I'll take that a step further, whereas my goal is to be the best coach that I can be. And it's not about, ego and whatnot. If I see a coach did something and I'm not sure about why they did it, I'll literally DM the coach and ask. I really don't care. Like I've messaged AJ before and be like, yo, why did you do it like this, or why did you say that? Andrew, I know I've asked you things. I will just ask. I don't care. I don't care if the coach is above me. I don't care if the coach is below me. If I see something and I can't figure out a reason why it's bad, then I'll say, like, why did you do this? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's good. I think we got time for one more, guys.
Yeah.
Let's do one more.
As you're pulling that up, I think there are certain staples, as we know, of things that should be used, right? Every so often you'll get someone that wants to try to reinvent the wheel from a nutrition standpoint, a training standpoint, and then a super supplementation standpoint. I think at the end of the day, the more things people want to try, the more variables you start to create and uncertainty. And our goal as coaches and as an athlete, you're trying to control everything, literally every variable possible. So when you start to sprinkle in this, and like, let's just say this guy's prepped. He obviously looked awesome. So if he were to work with another coach, and the coach failed to ask, hey, what did you do last prep? I'm just curious what you took. Why would you go and do something totally different when that worked? He doesn't need double the drugs. That's not going to do anything. That's not going to make him, he can't get any harder or leaner. The guy looked fucking awesome. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, sometimes people just have certain mantras they follow, and they're just like, this is when you're taking it, and this is how much you're using, and it's just like, hey, I'm having these side effects, right? This is where my lab work is. This is how I feel. And if you don't care as a coach, then again, why are you doing it? Why are you just trying to chase?
Yeah, it's not customization.
Yeah.
I mean, we all, in our group chat this week, we saw a peak plan from a very popular coach in terms of just base numbers. Like on Thursday, Friday, you're taking 700 grams of carbs, and on this day, you're pulling it down to 300. And my understanding was this person just sends it out to like athletes, whether they're a 200-pound classic athlete or a 250-pound open heavyweight.
And this is one of the most popular coaches in the industry right now.
Yeah, and you can only imagine that the PED plan that he's given to a 175-pound classic pro is probably the same PED plan he's given to a 270-pound open super heavyweight or pro bodybuilder. So, if you're a young coach or you're developing, make sure you take the time and take your athlete seriously. Customize your approach to every athlete's needs. And just because you did something with someone doesn't mean it's going to work with someone else. We do have tenets and pillars that we stand on in terms of, I'm not going to cross this line. Like, I'll give you an example. My line is, I'm not going to use DNP with somebody. Okay. I know that from day one. Okay. But in terms of everything else, almost everything else is fair game. And if it takes an extra customization approach, then give me that information like Kyle pointed out. Like, if you looked amazing last time and we're just trying to grow you a little bit more, or maybe your peak, we just need to bring you in a little bit fuller. It is not stupid. It's not cheating to look at what that other coach did with that person. And I'm not saying carbon copy it, but glean from it. What are the positive things that they got out of it, right?
And this is a good take. Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's a good take home is for everybody listening to this to consider is even though we scrutinize this plan a little bit and say we would have done this, we would have done that, the coach could have a very, very, very simple, easy answer to counter everything we just said. He looks great. Why would I change it?
Mm-hmm. What was your point, Kyle?
I honestly lost my train of thought. Hold on.
Well, I was also going to say something that you brought up in our group chat, Andrew, when I posted something, and again, like you brought up, this one, this is one of the top coaches in the industry right now that everybody knows that sent out the same refeed to different competitors that are 50 pounds difference. Andrew said, like, do they really think that we don't communicate with our colleagues? Yeah. Like all coaches talk. Like, if you do that, you're going to get caught. There's no way you're not getting caught. I don't think I've ever seen a coach cookie cutter something and not get caught. So don't do it. You're going to get caught.
I got a phony one about, I won't say the name of the coach just because I do like him. But one of my buddies was getting ready for his first national show, right? And he had a great off season. He was ready to go do either junior nationals or junior USAs. He won that class, by the way, because he took over his own prep in the last 6 days because he had received a peak plan. And he was friends with an online personality, we'll say, and they were buddies. And they were comparing plans. And literally, it was the same plan to a T. Now, my buddy was 140 pounds, a lightweight. The other guy was a super heavyweight. The foods for the peak week were exactly the same. The diazide, all the drugs were exactly the same. Which to me, in my mind, how do you know you need a diazide?
I was going to say that.
How do you know you need any type of diuretic on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday? If someone's writing those into your plans from day one, I would be very skeptical of their approach. And I would say, is this just to have on hand in case I need it? Or you want me to take this without even having eyes on me with check-ins. But anyway, let's move on to our last gentleman. It's Trey Settle is his name. I'm pulling the pictures up right now.
And I think there's a couple things in our prep just to mention that are like that. Like if your coach is predicting your diuretic a week out, they don't know what they're doing. I even tell my clients, like, they'll say, what are we doing for peak week? Like 2.5 weeks. I'm like, I don't know. We didn't get there yet. Like, it's based on what your body looks like and how you're responding. Like Kyle said last week or 2 episodes ago. He's like, Nick was looking great. Why the hell would I change what we were doing? We just kept doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that's the right way to go about things. And another one is T3. If your coach is programming T3 in the beginning and giving you a schedule for when to increase your T3, they don't know what the hell they're doing.
I do a spreadsheet now, and I have like all the compounds, and it says like this is not a prescription. This is to what to have on hand for when I might want to add it in. And it also the column for Clen, T3, T4, AIs. That's all blank. It just says have on hand, and it's usually blocked out for like the first 10 weeks for those things because I don't want to use those things the first 10 weeks if we don't have to. Yeah. But anyway, this is Trey Settle. I think he's an amateur. He's definitely an amateur. First thing that pops out to me, and I'm sorry to put you on blast too, but the gyno in that right pec for sure. I think that's, we do see pros on stage with gyno, but like, I think you got to get that fixed before you do your next show. That just stands out to me. And I know judges like Steve, that's an immediate disclaimer for if you have obvious synthol, obvious gyno, it's so-and-so off to the right. You know what I mean?
Were you at the 2016 Atlantic States when I competed?
Yeah.
I lost to a guy with bad gyno.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. But I
And
think
Steve was the head judge too.
I think because he had a special relationship with that individual in some way, shape, or form.
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? But all right. So Phil, what do you see in this guy's physique? His side shots. He's a classic.
Well, like
athlete.
you said, the first thing I saw was the gyno sticking out. So that really stood out to me. You can see he's got a development section, but there's not much detail in there. So it looks like he was either unable to flex it or didn't flex it, but it looks like he's trying to flex it, and it's just not flexing. So what that looks like to me is an electrolyte imbalance. I think he overdid the diuretics because, the leg kind of looks like you would see it doesn't take being peeled to see some lines in the side of the quad, but we see no lines. So it looks like he's having trouble activating that. We can see in the arm and the side chest, there's no real separation. We could see that there's no real separation or detail in the abs. So to me, this looks like he overdid the diuretics. It looks like an electrolyte imbalance because he just can't flex. So I have to see the other angles to know what kind of shape he's actually in. But from this angle, that's my determination.
We'll get to those in a sec. Kyle, what do you see in these shots?
I see a little bit of an imbalance. I don't think his lower body has enough muscle to compare it to his upper body. I look at how he's flexing. I think one of his better body parts is probably his chest, even in his side tricep, despite not turning to the screen where I could see that back shoulder. He still has a little hefty muscle there, nice pecs for sure.
Yeah.
I just think it's more of a muscle thing, and he's just not conditioned enough, right? He just needs to diet. That's where you're going to get the lines from. Again, I don't know if he used diuretics or stuff like that, so I can't really speak to any kind of imbalance potentially, but to me, diuretic ain't fixing someone that's not in shape, and from the side, you don't appear to be in the shape where it's going to be what you really want to be. Mm-hmm. Good physique, need more muscle, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah, the first thing besides the gyno that popped out at me was I think probably needed a good 3 weeks, and I think we might think that the legs are more matching the upper with that 3 weeks. You know how sometimes when someone just I'll give a prime example for me. When I was in the off season, I actually looked smaller because I call it fatter and flatter, right? As I got heavier and heavier, I need to be lean so you can see the cap shoulders, the cap the tricep lines, all those different variables, quads, all that stuff. I just kind of look like a blob as I got to be 280 plus. So I'm gonna say the same thing here. I think if he was 3-4 weeks more conditioned, we would see, the glute lines, hamstring, the quads that Phil's talking about. It could absolutely be electrolytes as all. We do know a lot of people at the end of the prep, not in great shape. They throw in diuretics thinking it's going to magically change them, because we know of popular coaches that do that, and sometimes it works for those people just because these are genetic freaks, and that's the key word, guys, genetic freaks. When you're more of an average mere mortal, us three are, we can't play those tricks. But let me
Chris Aceto actually admitted to that with the 2003 Night of Champions where Victor Martinez won. He said he wasn't peeled, but I peeked the shit out of him and he looked like he was peeled.
Yeah. That's who I was alluding to, and we all know he's not afraid to use diuretics. I mean, we've all seen the plans, and let's just say it's 10 times I think what we use in terms of diazide in some cases. All right, so I don't love his back shot. He's not posing it correctly. He's not balancing his weight between his right and left hips. But this also shows us right off the bat, glutes and hams are kind of soft. They definitely didn't come in. So it's definitely a conditioning factor as well. Phil, what do you see on this picture, in these pictures?
I think he doesn't have a posing coach, honestly, and I think that he would really, really, really benefit from a posing coach. I think there's lines that we would see. Again, I'm standing on the electrolyte imbalance, just because he looks like he can't flex certain muscle groups. But his posing it's way off here. Like you said, he's off center. His hips are off center. His hips are turned to one side. It's uneven. I'm surprised he got his arms level with his hips so uneven. I could see what he's trying to do in the front double bicep, but again, that doesn't really benefit him. He's also pushing his hips forward rather than back, making them look bigger. Whereas if he sucked those back and brought the chest forward a little bit, he'd have a better taper there. He's not posing the shoulders correctly. The hands aren't in the proper position. I mean, there's so many things wrong with this posing, but again, he's not in shape.
Kyle?
I'm assuming it's a first-time competitor, right? So I think for someone first time, if this is the shape they can get to, it's not terrible. Obviously, we go from looking at a 212 Pro.
True.
It's night and day, but it is night and day in terms of the duration, the time it took to get to where Martin, I think was his name is, right?
Yep.
So with this kid here, again, muscle, I stand on the fact that he definitely needs more muscle. And I look at his abdominals, right? So I saw it on the side, now I see it here. I think he needs to work on his TA. The abs are like any muscle, guys. You have to fucking train them. If you don't train them, they might show a little bit just from being used in other exercises that you brace with, but they're not going to be sharp, right?
How much do you have, like, say, an athlete like Nick, who, when he's just standing there, doesn't have, like, the smallest midsection, but when he's on stage, he does a really good job of pulling it in and showing detail. Like, what do you have a guy like Nick doing for ab exercises?
So Nick did a lot of captain's chair raises. This time for the Olympia, we'll have a conversation in terms of more TA related training, just so that he gets used to pulling that stomach in, especially when the food volume is a little bit higher.
For viewers, Kyle means transverse abdominal. It's the internal abdominal wall that pulls everything in.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you. So with Nick, again, the frequency, 5-6 days a week minimum, like he's training them every day, like it's the normal muscle group. It's just you're not spending a 45-minute session on them. It's more of 5-10 minutes, ideally fasted. Nick usually does post-cardio, but, at the end of the day, he's getting the job done. He's getting the work in, and that's why his abs look razor fucking sharp on stage. I think any of the men's physique guys that have really good cores, I have a pro being in a few weeks of on, that kid, his core is elite. If you ever see his abdominal shots, everything is fucking there. Now, some of it's genetic in terms of the placement of the abdominals, but the fact of the matter is he trains the shit out of them, and just like any muscle, if you were to just train quads, Phil, you brought your legs up. You trained the shit out of your quads. You didn't say, hey, I trained them once a month and they got better. You trained them as much as you could recover from.
You're saying you don't just leave it to chance. There's a very specific volume, attention to detail. And I'll also say this, I kind of see abs similar to calves in terms of their recovery, right? Like, I can hit calves 6 days a week, not on day one, but, maybe week 1, twice a week. By week 4, I'm at 3 to 4 sessions a week if I wanted to really bring my calves up, and then eventually I can train them every single training session. Abdominals, I feel like, are very similar. As long as you're recovering, you can absolutely hit them.
I think the first time, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I have a layoff from training abs, I've been very into my training since January also. I've been training pretty hard again. Whenever I do abs for the first time, I cramp like a mother.
Oh, dude.
It's the worst. And it's not clen related for those that might think it's clen. I was a fat piece of shit and I didn't train any abs. And when you do, I can do one hard set and I'm just like,
is it like where
has to set in or something?
Is it where if you try to do another hard set like that, they're going to cramp right up? Like your knees are going to pull to your chest and you're going to be spending 10 minutes trying to straighten out.
And then I go on the wall and I do these weird stretches and, try to just open up and relax. Yeah. But, eventually the more you do it, you won't cramp like anything else. You get used to it.
Kind of like posing, right? Posing and sweating.
I think the better assuming you're sweating because of not being conditioned and not so much that you did some weird insulin shit or you get nervous. Yes, 100%. If you've never posed and went through rounds of posing, I don't care what kind of shape you're in. If you go on stage and try to hold something, you're going to realize very quickly, fuck, like this is a lot harder than I thought. So I always tell people, don't wait till you're 2 weeks out when you're tired posing. Start posing in the morning when you just get out of bed and you're groggy. Workout, two totally different feels when you're full versus when you've got nothing in your stomach and you're just fucking opening your eyes to the sunlight. That's different.
Yeah.
If I think a client is not putting enough effort into the posing and I can see they're struggling with it, I will actually put into their plan 2 different types of posing. After cardio, they will do form posing, just making sure everything is aligned properly and they're hitting their pose right. And then post-workout, I'll do what I call condition posing. And I'll tell them, I want you to over-pose these poses because I'm trying to condition your muscles to be able to hold it. Because we all know, you get on stage sometimes and you're just like trying to show this off. And even though squeezing harder is not going to do anything, you do it anyway. So you need to be conditioned to be able to sustain that. But I wanted to bring up one more point from what Kyle said earlier before we get too far away from it, is Kyle mentioned that training the transverse abdominal wall made Nick's abs sharper, which is true. So what happens is, think about if you pushed your stomach out and you flex your abs. How deep do they look? How separated? They really don't, because your abs are going to contract internally. They're going to contract inward. So your transverse is pulling everything in and allowing your abs to contract properly. And if your transverse is weak, you can't draw everything in and contract them properly, so your abs are not going to be as separated. So again, to great point with Kyle and what he did with Nick is making sure that transverse was properly conditioned so that you could show off the abs properly.
Final thing I'll say about posing is that in today's day and age, 2025, if your posing isn't good, even at local shows, it shows. Like, you're going to get marked down because everybody else has a posing coach. Everyone else has a coach that's telling them to put time into their training. They're writing schedules. Like for me, for instance, 15 weeks out, it's 3 sessions a week. I want you to hold each pose for 6 seconds and transition right to the next one. Not go and check the phone and see how that picture looked or see how the video. I want you to pretend like you're on stage in front of Tyler, Steve, or whoever, and they're calling the poses to you. Like, literally start to imagine it. So when you are in that situation, it's not a shock to your system. Hold each pose for 6 seconds, transition into the next shot with the same amount of time you would as if you're on stage. And I want, it's literally, practice as you're going to play, because the worst thing to me is when you get into the hotel room with the client the day before and you're like, okay, I'm going to run you through a couple rounds, all right? And you get them going and they're like stopping and they're letting their gut out when they turn to the side. And you're like, whoa, what are you doing, dude? Like, I'll keep it in on stage. It's like, no. Let's start over. We need to practice as we're going to play because you're not going to have that mind-muscle connection. You're not going to have that muscle memory. You're just going to turn. That gut's going to come out more than we want to see it. And you're being judged from the minute you get on stage to the minute you get off from all angles. You can argue that open guys get a little bit of a leeway with the stomachs and stuff, but if you want everyone to walk away saying, man, that guy was polished, like he came to play today, have your posing down on point.
What's actually funny is...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, finish. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a funny story to that, is whenever we hear that, we know it's complete horse shit, but I've had it happen one time where it was true. I was, Dorian Hamilton sometimes brings me out, like, if he's got, like, a big lineup of guys, so there's, like, a second eye. So, like, I went out to help him with the peaks for the guys at the Olympia one year, and we had this classic guy, I forget his last name, Ricky. He ended up top 10 that year.
Ricky Moulton.
Yeah, yes, he ended up top 10 that year.
Nasty.
And when we were in his hotel room, looking at him every day, he's posing like crap, and I'm like, dude, he's like, no, just trust me. When I get on stage, it's gonna be there. And we're like, dude, just like me and Dorian are like panicking. Dude, he gets on stage at prejudge and just smashes it. I was like, holy shit, he told the truth.
He is a good poser because I watched him when he got second place to Abner Logan at the Tampa Pro in 2019. He looked like a comic book. He was just these wacky dimensions,
We were so worried. Legs. We were so worried about his posing, and then he crushed it on stage, and we're like, wow.
That's crazy.
What I was going to say real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Was for posing. There's a huge difference between your local and regional show and a national show, and then obviously a pro show. So obviously, yes, we work with some of the best people in the world, or we're talking about some of the best people in the world and being nitpicky. Obviously, anyone can just go to your local regional show, and if that is your mindset, like you only went through one round of posing and then it wasn't too bad, and you think that's going to work, for example, at this weekend in Universe, you have another thing coming. Because when you're on a level playing field in terms of, okay, this guy wins a few shots, I win a few shots, they're going to keep putting you through rounds. And the reality is, even if it's neck and neck, let's just say there was a pro show recently where it's neck and neck, okay? They tried to say the deciding factor is who was better at posing, who held the poses longer, stuff like that. So I think prepare to hold your poses. If you can hold your poses legitimately for 10 seconds and you can do 3 or 4 rounds, fantastic. Again, fasted and post-training, two different beasts. When you have water and food in you, much different. But that's plenty. I don't think many people ever practice to that magnitude, which is why they get on stage and they'll sometimes be shocked, like, holy shit, they put us through a lot. And I'm just like,
well, let me give a quick one on that, because now I practiced my posing in 2020 for the Universe because I'd been in shape almost the whole year. Me and Rachel just started dieting. Every show was shutting down, but she wanted to do 6 shows that year, so we're like, we're going to take advantage of cheap flights. We're going to go everywhere, and we're going to do shows. So I did the Universe that year, and I'd been practicing like 4, maybe 5 rounds, game type situations. Well, Tyler had us go 7 rounds, and I'll tell you what, that 6th, 7th round, I didn't even know if I still had a Terry's, like holding a rear double bicep, because he kept on, even after those 5, 6, 7 rounds, he kept on going front double, rear double, front double, rear double, like 2 or 3 more times, because it was between me and this other kid who ended up winning. I got second, he got first, and he ended up being a pretty good pro. But point being is, like, go that extra distance, like at least once or twice, so you know what that sympathetic like response on your body feels like. Do you start sweating after 5 or 6 rounds? Are you not able to hold your arms up after those 6 or 7 rounds? So definitely practice like you want to play. What was your point?
I was going to say that's actually pretty funny that you mentioned the Terry's, because that actually cost me an overall. I was in shape for the beach, honestly, like one summer. And my friend hits me up and he's like, yo, there's a show in our town tomorrow. I'm like, no, there's not. He's like, yeah, there is. It's the Gold's Classic. I'm like, really? He's like, bro, you should just enter. You're in good shape. I'm like, dude, no. I'm like, I'm not impressed. Like, I don't look good. Like, he's like, but you're lean enough to look really good on stage. So I'm like, all right, fuck it. So in the morning, I go check in. I run out. I find a place to get tanned. I come back. It ends up being a pretty damn good show. And but this was back when you didn't have to have glutes to win the show. If everything else looked good, then you were fine, because I definitely did not have glutes. And honestly, I think my shape and development won the show, because there were guys that were tighter. But again, this was back when, you weren't just judged on condition. So I ended up winning the heavyweights. But the thing is, I was the last heavyweight, so I posed last. Then I got awarded the heavyweights, and then I had to go into the overall. And I wasn't practicing posing. I wasn't in contest prep. I was trying to open my lat. Nothing was happening.
No.
I looked like a box trying to get my lat, and he destroyed me. I couldn't flex my muscles, and it was hilarious. But one more thing I wanted to say before we skip is, to Kyle's point about condition on stage, there's a physiological explanation for this as well. When you are more conditioned towards posing, you can look this up if you guys aren't familiar with what's called the anaerobic threshold. When you step over the anaerobic threshold, that's when your body can no longer utilize, simple resources of energy to produce energy, like oxygen and body fat. And your body switches over to using carbohydrates. So the more conditioned you are, the higher your anaerobic threshold is. And this is why long distance runners can run so much, because they're so efficient at using oxygen, which they have an unlimited source of. So they're not going to run out of fuel. But when you're on stage and you're posing, if you are not conditioned, your anaerobic threshold's low, which means you're using glycogen right away. So you're going to start burning through your load. You're going to start flattening out like hell, versus somebody who's really conditioned, they're just using oxygen. So they're not losing their load at all. Whereas you're getting flatter and flatter and flatter. And as you lose glycogen, the water comes out of the muscles, you start sweating, you start leaking, you're looking watery, and everything falls apart.
For you nerds, we're talking about oxidative phosphorylation.
And there we go.
Versus substrate level phosphorylation.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's look at this plan. Trey Settle's plan. Okay, so he's 5'4". He went from 168 to 150 on stage, so he lost 18 pounds in this prep. He didn't give us a timeline, so this is honestly our fault. We need to get better parameters for the information that we need, and like we said, like Kyle pointed out, some before pictures, some after pictures.
Well, it says 14 weeks right here, so we could assume we started at 14. It says it right in your gear where your marker is.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. All right, but anyway, so we'll get to that. So, I mean, that tells me right there, 12, 14 weeks, you needed another 5 to 6 weeks to come in totally peeled. But anyway, so we're on the diet. Training day, he was doing 30 minutes of spin bike lists, of low intensity, steady state. It looks like he trains after meal 1. He's got Greek yogurt in there, some whey isolate. How do you guys feel about dairy at that level, like Greek yogurt? I know, Phil, you like dairy.
It depends on how their body is responding to it, right? Because I don't consider, first of all, I use a specific one, Fage 0% unflavored Greek yogurt, because it's the lowest lactose content, right? So if their bodies can handle it, fine. So usually I'll pull the Greek yogurt out at 4 weeks out, 5, 6 weeks out. But if they're looking fine and they really enjoy it because it tastes good, it's easy to eat and things like that, I'll leave it alone. But only if they're looking really good and only if they're already dry and conditioned. If I see any water retention or any type of digestive, if I see anything, or even if I just have an idea that I might see anything, I'll probably end up pulling that, and I usually do. But I usually leave that in there till 6 weeks out-ish. Just makes the diet a little easier, tastier.
Okay. I was going to tell you, if you hear yourself breaking up a little bit, don't worry about it, because the feed that's going to get uploaded to the internet it's better than what you see and what we hear. So. Oh,
he's got it in there twice. No, I definitely wouldn't do that.
Yeah, he's got Greek yogurt in there twice. It looks like he's got carbs every meal. Pretty heavy on those pre-workout carbs with 100 grams cream of rice. Oh yeah, Kyle, anything to add about his diet?
Again, I'm a creature of habit, and I don't set diets out to be the same every day. I think it's asinine. But anyway,
you like to see that? You like to see that manipulation, or because I think there's a lot to be gleaned from, or not gleaned. That's not a good word. The magic happens in the manipulation from higher and lower days, right? That's
100%. And even if you wanted to keep the same macros, if you're eating 3,000 calories right now, okay, and you have 300 grams of carbs one day and 75 grams of fat, and then you bring those carbs down to 200, and then you add in the difference in fats, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to notice a difference in your physique. You're going to notice a difference, right? Because your insulin sensitivity, just your metabolic pathways that are being activated when you're going and shifting a little bit. I'm not talking about necessarily going to more fructose and sugar and things of that nature, but just how your body's going to adapt when you're not doing the same thing every single fucking day is a huge difference. So I don't know why people don't pick up on that and start to utilize that from off the bat. If their diet is X every day, simply keep the calories the same, just change the macronutrients and observe how your body responds. You might find, hey, I actually feel and look way better and leaner when my fats are a bit higher, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
There are some coaches that are very, very keen to keeping their protein through the fucking roof, right? So we're talking 500-600 grams of protein. That's the way of going about it. Again, there's a method you can say based on the results, hey, it must work. But at some point, okay, maybe you don't need that much protein, right?
Well, when someone's eating that much protein, though, what does that tell you? In terms of, okay, so let's just pretend that, you're eating, I don't know, let's say you eat 60 pounds of protein through meat in a year. Are you putting on 60 pounds of muscle? No one is.
Absolutely
Nobody
not.
is. I've never seen anyone put on. My point being is that where are those calories from protein going? Energy utilization at the end of the day.
Yes.
So you need adequate levels of protein for the amino acids to support muscle protein synthesis and maintenance, as well as your peptide hormone production and neurotransmitters and all that stuff. But beyond that, it's getting used as energy.
Right. And it's just you're getting it in the form of a protein instead of carbs and things like that, just like keto, right? You get energy when your body converts and doesn't use glucose from a carbohydrate standpoint, right?
Exactly.
So that all aside, right? I look at the cardio. I don't know if it was just always 30 minutes. If so, that's incredibly too low.
Let me read the next part here. Because on his off days, he was doing a mile-long walk, which to me, that's
It looks like his off days are a mile. His cardio and training days are 30 minutes. He didn't mention titrating that up. He mentioned it's a spin bike. So I consider things like, hey, do you sit at the desk all day? Are you moving around? That's how I'll manipulate what type of cardio to do. In terms of the other feedback he gave us, he just mentioned that was his starting diet on the left, and then he pulled carbs down slowly pretty much. And then because 6 weeks out, I think he was prepping himself. So, kudos to him getting, if it was his first time doing a show, that's not bad. I respect that for sure. 6 weeks out, he realized he was behind schedule, so he pulled his carbs down. I'm sure he made a lot of progress. That was something that, hey, obviously should have been a little more aggressive in the beginning, perhaps not start as heavy. As far as the refeeds and things like that, I think at the end of the day, if you're using a refeed to gather data, that's one thing. But there's data that doesn't need to be gathered sometimes when you're not in shape yet. So if you're using it more so to stimulate the metabolic activity, cool, I can understand. But necessarily having, hey, I'm going to dig Monday to Thursday and then Friday, Saturday are 2 high days that just have the same macros, what are you getting from that? It's not doing anything. You're setting your fat loss back because now you're not going to lose fat until Monday.
Well, you can't even collect data from that because you're not in show shape. You're not in show condition. So whatever happened when you're doing that, when you're nowhere near competition shape, that's not going to be your response when you're in shape. So that data doesn't apply. There is no data there. Yeah. He made another mistake where he said he pulled, at 6 weeks out, he realized he was too fat. He pulled carbs down to 50 grams. That's a huge shift. Like, shock the body. You're going to stall your metabolism. There's a lot of bad things that can go on there.
Well, he mentioned before that he was taking things down slowly, pretty much. Carbs were slowly pulled down.
Yep.
But then at 6 weeks, I don't know where he was at when he made that drastic pull. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But again, I am always about, if your aim is to be in the best shape possible, you want to make sure you're seeing constant growth. If you look at yourself and you're like, okay, I'm 20% body fat. I know what I weigh, what I will be on stage. There's a certain amount of weight that's got to come off. You can't just have weeks of, I'm the same weight. Yeah. Now, can you recomp to a degree if drugs just come into play? If you use tren in the beginning of prep, if you use Klein to kickstart, sure. But at some point when you're week 11 to 6 is 2 pounds of a difference, you got a problem, right? Your body's stalled, so maybe they need some fatigue management in terms of, okay, I'm going to give you more food and you're going to rest, etc. But in this case, don't be afraid to do more cardio. He looks like he was at 168, came down to 150. Obviously, I think we can agree probably at least 10 pounds to kind of come off to be in better shape.
Definitely.
So moving forward in the future, the next time, Trey, you do a show, how can I be 150 on stage but in better shape? That is successful in my opinion, right? Don't look at the scale weight because you might say, I weigh the same. Yes, but you should have been 140 in good shape here. So if you can gain 10 pounds of tissue in a year, whenever the next time you compete, you're doing a good job. So always keep that in mind as well.
I want to point out also, though, because you made a great point earlier in the episode when we were breaking down someone else's plan, talking about when you're making the dietary changes, are you making these small carb pulls that are just so small that your body's just quickly adapting to it, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to pull down to nothing with your first diet change, but you want to do it in a significant enough way that your body is in a deficit and you're going to burn fat because of that change. It sounds like, if I were just to imagine, let's say he started his diet at 400 grams of carbs, maybe like when he started making his pulls, he probably pulled like 40 grams of carbs out. And then maybe another 30 grams of carbs out because he's like, oh, I want to stay full. I want to keep the carbs in. And those changes a lot of times are just too little,
For most people, right? And again, are there anomalies where you can keep the food to those small changes, minute changes, and they make a lot of progress? Yes. But most people listening, you need bigger. You need shifts of 300-400 calories minimum to really get to that next level. And then, okay, my body lasts about 2 weeks when I do this shit. What am I going to do next? Okay, maybe I'm going to bang cardio a little higher. What am I going to do next? Maybe I'm going to use T3. Maybe then I'm going to pull food. Have a systematic approach. Don't go from, Andrew, I send you a check-in today, and then next week you change my diet, drugs, and cardio.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need to do all three. It doesn't make sense. So that's where you want to be patient and say, okay, I'm going to take this approach. You have tools. If you use all the tools, you're left, what are you going to build with, right? There's nothing you can do. So let's move into the training.
Yeah, training, it looks like he was doing a 3-on, 1-off, alternating an A and B split. A split was lower push-pull, which was quad dominant legs, flat decline chest, vertical pulling for back, okay? And then split B was hand dominant legs, inclined shoulder pressing, and horizontal pulling. Phil, what do you think about this?
I think he's overthinking the training. He's trying to do something complex here when honestly he's got a very, like, I don't want to say underdeveloped, but like intermediate physique. Like he's just putting the mass on, right? So he's like, you're not at the point where your training needs to be that complex. I think it needs to stay more heavy. It needs to stay more basic and focus on, muscle retention. I can see what he's trying to do. He's trying to group the lats with the vertical movements, and he's trying to group the horizontal movements together, agonist, antagonist, and whatnot. So I see what he's trying to do. I think it's just a little bit of overthinking, and I would bet money the actual workouts are very similar to the overthinking and just trying to be a little bit too specific rather than just focus on meat and potatoes.
Yeah, just too much specialization there. Like you just got to grow all around. Is what I would say.
Drugs, my favorite drugs.
Yeah, so 12 to 14 weeks out. That's a 2-week difference. So I don't know what that means. 300 tests,
the
370.
Approximately 12 to 14 weeks. That's what.
Okay, so let's say you started the drugs at 14 weeks out.
Yeah.
Dieting at 12 weeks out. That might be a safe assumption. Starting dose, 300 tests, 375 mass per week. Titrated up to 450 tests and 625 mass per week. 50 milligrams every day of probably fake Anavar for the last 6 weeks. Now, here's the thing. Let me just say, if you think for the first, because you'll know within the first 4 to 5 days if your Anavar is not Anavar, toss it out. It's only $100 to get another bottle. People are always like, oh, but then I got to pay the $20 for shipping, and it's like, okay, so you're going to bank your finished look there's going to be documented pictures of on the internet that your friends and family are going to see on not spending another $120 to get a better source of Anavar. You know what I mean? It's just like at the end of the day, you're not going to do that one thing when you're spending, let's say, an average of $500 a week on a minimum on this prep between food, coaching, tanning, your training membership, all the other stuff that goes into it. So to me, it's like it's a no-brainer. If you think your gear is bad or fake, just make a switch,
You want to plug your coupon code?
What's that?
You want to plug your coupon code for gear?
Yeah. it's Sir Kyle at gmail.com.
Touche.
All the feds listening right now, they're sitting there.
Kyle's going to get so many emails now.
Yep. All right, so let's go down. So in the last 2 weeks, he pulled his testosterone to 0 and bumped his mass to 750. Phil, break this one down. What do you see?
I really can't break anything down. I think it's completely designed wrong. I think he did this himself. I think it was a mistake to try to do a prep by yourself. Even I think you should have hired a coach. There's no other sport that you're not going to have a coach for, and this requires knowledge. And I think that every single thing about this is wrong. I think the mass is like a pro dose. That dose. I put somebody on that dose who's 250 on stage, 260 on stage. That's way too high of a masteron dose. Everything was done wrong. I don't see any AIs in here. I don't see there's no. Did he put Winnie in here? There's no Winnie in here. There's not really any hardeners besides the mast. It just has no concept to it. It looks like kind of like It's like
kind of like what you have in the kitchen, in the box, in the
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like he just wanted to use tests and mass, and he just had it. The only oral he had was Anavar. So, if that was all I had, I mean,
I can make it work.
I guess he titrated up, which is good. You don't got to start off the very highest. I think the Anavar I wouldn't put in the last 6 weeks. I don't. If I'm using it, I'm fucking using it. I'm not going to put it in for the last 6 weeks. That to me is not going to be the drug of choice. Let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was no AI, so potentially some of the fat loss was stalled because his estradiol was too high. Mm-hmm. He mentioned the pre-existing gyno. I don't know if that's self-induced, puberty. I'm not really sure.
No. Yeah, and I agree. I think for what Trey did, I think he did a good job with the tools that he had and the knowledge that he had at the time. Because I don't want to shit on him, is what I'm trying to say. No. But I think if you're going to do a prep, I think you should hire a coach, and because someone like us would have definitely set you up with a better designed diet, a more competent gear plan that's going to have stages in it to elicit certain looks and feedback. As the guys already touched on, no AI, only one hardener in terms of the Masteron and a high dose at that, not dealing with the gyno. It just doesn't seem to have a lot of rhyme or reason. It seems like, hey, what do I have in the old cupboard here, and okay, this is what I have. And, it's 2025. It's almost like an Amazon Prime-like effect with gear. If, again, I just got to say, like, if you think your gear's fake or bad, just toss it out or sell it to your buddy or some shit, and then use that money to go buy some real stuff, okay? Guys, is there anything else we want to talk about?
Did anybody share their peak? We had one person talk about their peak, right?
Did we? Let me double check.
Actually, no, I don't think we did.
No. So we had a different one, which I think we'll save for a different time if people like these, where they go into little detail, but not the kind of detail that we like. It's very general. So maybe that's a separate episode, guys. Of maybe we'll do pictures 1 week out from the show, and then if you have, let's say, a front double and a rear double for every day throughout that week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, show pics, okay? And then tell us exactly what you did with your peak. So we can see, are you in shape a week out from a show? And then we can see the steps you and your coach took to get you to that look on stage, and we can break down that. I think that would be a really interesting episode. You guys can let us know in the comments if you like that idea. And of course, as we mentioned before, check our stories and check this episode, because I'm going to put up a link for a form for these types of submissions. So we're getting apples to apples information, and we can give some really good advice based off what we're seeing and the information we want. I do also want to point out, we did have one submission that broke the rules that we're just going to throw away because it has the coach's emblem and the coach's logo all over the place. Remember, guys, we don't want to be able to identify your coach. We just don't want to know that kind of stuff. I mean, we probably already know it, but we don't want it for this, and we just want to look at what was done, break it down, and not have preconceived notions or ideas on who the coach was. So if you guys can follow those rules, we'll be happy to do these more again. Guys, anything else today?
No, I think this is a great episode. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun to break these down. What'd you say?
Yeah,
Kyle had something to say.
The people that made submissions, obviously you guys are the brave, the few, the proud. So continue to do that. Hopefully encourage other people that are feeling a little vulnerable, a little nervous, to indeed share things. Obviously, again, as we mentioned, you can share as much or as little. The more you share, the more helpful we can be. Otherwise, there are a couple of me that I just gave you my opinion, but there wasn't enough information for me to kind of bring it to light here. So yeah, I appreciate it. Keep it coming, and we pay attention to the comments, and our goal is to try to serve all of you the best way possible, especially some people that don't have the funds potentially, or they have limited resources, so that you can at least make the best decisions possible to stay as healthy as possible and to get the best results possible.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us for this episode. If you liked what we did, please let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Share more ideas with us. I think we dropped another gem. We're going to do a peak week only review, so you'll see that in the show notes on where to send those pictures and the protocol. But guys, anything else you want to say today?
No,
I think it was pretty good.
I think so too. Awesome. So we are Unwracked. Thank you.